In a stylish LA suburb, a young, innocent couple is ambushed by a ruthless gunman.
We have nothing really concrete to go on about who did this.
Then, an old police report surfaces and leads investigators to a mysterious relationship.
Some of the letters he wrote were incriminating. They said things like, "I was there for you, why aren't you there for me?"
Can SID discover why the couple's past crossed with a killer? Far from the neon lights of Hollywood, a young couple who've struggled to make their own California dream arrive at their new home in West Hills. Forensic experts from LAPD's Scientific Investigation Division and detectives pick through the pieces of the suburban puzzle. One victim, Jamie Navaroli, is dead, while his girlfriend, April Mahoney, clings to life.
Jamie's shot on the driver's side of the car. April is shot on the passenger side of the car.
She was shot and critically injured. April tried to crawl up underneath the truck that they had arrived in, probably in order to try to protect herself from the gunfire.
Unconscious, April can't tell the investigators anything at this point. She's rushed to the hospital.
She was actually the only eyewitness to the actual crime and could identify the shooter. She is really the key to the whole case.
SID surveys the crime scene, bagging several cigarette butts that might have DNA evidence on them. They also gather shell casings near the body.
We were asked to look at these and determine how many guns and what type of guns were used.
Detectives quickly decide that this wasn't a robbery gone bad. It's beginning to look like someone had a personal vendetta against this young couple.
The victims didn't have any property missing. The female victim, April Mahoney, her purse was still there intact. The way that Jamie Navaroli was shot at a close range, it was very obvious to me whoever did this wanted him dead.
They were executed in the driveway, so that leads me to believe that someone was lying in wait for them to show up.
Investigators question neighbors. One of them remembers something unusual and troubling.
He saw on the day before the murder a male in front of the house in a red car, and he appeared to just be waiting for someone to arrive home.
If this mystery man returned the next night to kill, investigators suspect he may have left a clue behind somewhere in the neighborhood.
So I had the trash cans fingerprinted, the cars fingerprinted. Might lead to a clue of fingerprints of somebody that was lying in wait.
As SID processes the evidence around the yard, detectives ask family and friends the same question: who wanted Jamie and April dead? From the father's perspective, the young couple had worked their way up from hard times. Both recovering addicts, they had finally gotten their lives together.
They had a very good, loving relationship, and they had respect for each other.
Everyone echoes Jamie's dad, a lovely couple raising 2 kids and no enemies. How do investigators find a killer in this idyllic neighborhood?
We believed it to be a very difficult case. We have minimal witnesses. We have some evidence found at the scene, but nothing really concrete to go on about who did this.
And the one person who could help, April, still can't speak.
She was in critical condition, heavily sedated, so it was obvious that we couldn't conduct an interview.
Yet the unconscious woman had left behind a stunning admission. She'd recognized the killer.
A paramedic that was administering first aid to her, he asked her if she knew who shot her, and she said,
"Yes."
Detectives reevaluate their interviews, looking for anything that might give them a clue. But they really need to speak with April. 2 days later, they get their chance.
I got a call from the nurse that April Mahoney had woke up and could talk. The tubes had been removed from her mouth.
Thank you.
We immediately went to the hospital to get a statement from her. She couldn't move her head, her arms. However, she could speak. She could speak very softly.
She utters the name of the man who shot her and killed her boyfriend.
Randy. She only knew him by first name. She did not know his last name. It was an acquaintance.
But she does give detectives a place to start. April says that she once lived with Jamie in a loft above a local muffler shop, and that the owner, Kenny Layton, knows the mysterious Randy.
That was about all I could get from her at that point. It was one piece of the puzzle that was extremely important.
And so we went right to Kenny Layton and asked him about this guy named Randy.
Layton is cooperative.
Yeah, I know this guy Randy, but he doesn't stay in my shop.
He didn't really know his last name, didn't know that much about him.
He works at a strip bar up the street and hangs out there. That's all I know about him.
Layton also describes what Randy looks like. Mid-30s, with blonde hair. Detectives suddenly fear the investigation may be going in the wrong direction. Neighbors described a prowler with dark hair, not blonde. They hope someone at the strip club can clear this up.
The manager had a copy of his driver's license because he was an employee of theirs.
The photo on the license is a setback. Randy's hair is blonde, but detectives pursue the lead. Now they have a last name, Randy Williams. They discover he's a drifter with a troubled past.
We were able to figure out exactly who he was, found that he had an arrest record.
Then the strip club manager calls detectives back. He's spotted Williams after they last talked and has big news.
The bartender at the strip club, he observed him with dark hair. So that was an important thing, that he had dyed his hair black.
But Williams, a loner with no known address, has disappeared.
A lot of resources were put forth to getting him. We had a lot of people looking for him.
As investigators step up their search, SID reconstructs the crime through the physical evidence. They focus on the cigarette butts.
The saliva on a cigarette butt is an excellent source of DNA. So if a suspect is smoking at a crime scene, when the detectives track him down, we can connect him to that crime scene with DNA.
But the results lead nowhere.
We believe that Jamie and April were chain smokers, and as it turns out, a lot of the cigarette butts are theirs.
News from SID's trace analysis unit isn't any better.
We did get some prints off the cars that belonged to the victims, but that was it. The prints really didn't help us.
Investigators are at a dead end, and the one person who can help them has fallen back into a coma.
I spoke to Northridge Hospital, and April was now unconscious and unable to speak and was unresponsive.
SID now turns to the ballistics evidence to see if the shell casings can lead them to their suspect.
It was learned from the cartridge case that it was a 9mm handgun that had been used to shoot these individuals. A 9mm Sig Sauer pistol.
But investigators need to find the actual murder weapon to make a match. When suddenly they get a break.
The next morning, the hospital calls Detective Glary and says, "She's awake enough. You better get down here and see her."
Not knowing how long April will remain conscious, detectives rush to the hospital with mugshots.
Detective Glary puts it in something called a six-pack, a photo card that's got 6 pictures of similar-looking people.
April was unable to speak. She had tubes in her throat, and so I had to place the card in front of her and point to each picture.
When Randy's photo, number 5, appears, April recoils in terror.
She began shaking. Her head was going up and down, her eyes were tearing up.
She nodded her head that that was Randy.
But what drove this small-time hood to gun down a young, innocent couple? Investigators will be shocked to learn the answer may be buried deep in police records. Randy Williams, the man who investigators believed killed a young couple, has disappeared, and the detectives are stumped.
Randy hasn't had a job in years. He is a drug user. He lives from one person to the next.
Investigators come up with a plan. They blitz the media with images of their suspect.
This picture was in the news, on television, and in the newspaper.
Their strategy works. Investigators get a tip that Williams is holed up in a no-name neighborhood in downtown LA. When the police move in, Williams surprisingly gives up without a fight.
He was wanted for murder. He just turned himself in.
The district attorney didn't want to file a case against him initially, felt that we needed more evidence.
Police have Williams off the streets, but they have only 48 hours to hold him without a formal charge. Only 2 short days to make their very circumstantial case airtight.
You just need time to put together these cases because they're so involved.
Ironically, Williams himself helps police keep him in jail.
We found out that he was on probation for burglary charges.
For having disappeared for 3 weeks, Williams violated his probation. Now they can hold him for several months, and investigators need this extra time. There are still too many loose ends. For starters, Williams seems more like an easy mark than a cutthroat killer.
We had a hunch that there was someone behind this murder, but we had really no reason for Randy Williams to commit this murder.
For a month, investigators revisit clues, trying to sketch out a theory of the crime. But they desperately need April to fill in the blanks. Then, on Christmas Eve, 8 weeks after the shooting, April dies.
You know, there's nothing you can do. That was sad.
The fact that April died during the course of the investigation put that much more pressure on our department to solve this case.
Investigators regroup. Without April, their case is very thin. With Williams in jail, they secretly monitor his mail and phone records for any new leads, following their hunch that Williams had an accomplice.
Some of the letters he wrote were incriminating.
And his pen pal was especially suspicious. Kenny Layton, the man who had shrugged off Williams as a mere acquaintance. But Williams's letters suggest a more familiar relationship.
They said things like, I was there for you, why aren't you there for me, making demands for Kenny to send him money.
Detectives shift their investigation. Was there something Williams had on Layton? A closer look at Layton reveals he's not the neighborly entrepreneur investigators originally took him to be.
Kenny Layton is very arrogant. He would threaten people. He used people to do things for him.
They also learn Layton is out on bail on a burglary charge for stealing brakes from a nearby warehouse. In Layton's police report, investigators find a shocking connection. Their murder victims, April Mahoney and Jamie Navaroli, witnessed Layton's burglary. When Jamie and April lived in the loft above Layton's shop, they had accidentally seen him stealing car brakes.
That's where their relationship became sour. Jamie and April told the cops about what he was doing, that those brakes were brought there by Mr. Layton and another individual, and that they had them in a truck and that they had unloaded them.
Did Layton have something to do with the couple's ambush out of revenge?
Killing of witnesses is so critical to the justice system because if you don't have anybody willing to testify, then the whole system is going to fall apart.
After further investigation, a devious relationship between Williams, the shiftless drifter, and Layton, his criminal patron, begins to emerge.
Randy would do a lot of things for Kenny. He did his dirty work for him. And in return, Kenny would give him drugs. He'd give him money.
Investigators believe that Layton directed Williams to gun down the innocent LA couple. But they will be shocked to learn the real reason behind these cold-blooded murders. Kenny Layton, the man who detectives once mistook for a helpful bystander, now appears to have orchestrated the murders of 2 witnesses against him.
He was an extremely dangerous person at that point.
Investigators already know Randy Williams had written Layton demanding money. But to show conspiracy, they need to prove that Layton had responded. They knew Randy had received anonymous letters and money orders. Now they needed to connect those to Layton.
Question documents at SID looked at some of the documents, the money orders, some notes that he had in with the money orders.
Anybody can look at 2 sets of writing and say whether they look alike or they don't look alike. Our analysis goes much deeper than that. You look at how each letter is made, its slant, speed, rhythm. There's so many characteristics that you need to evaluate in writing beyond the obvious.
We're able to connect those back to Mr. Layton as having written those, and so that becomes very important in our case.
The handwriting forensics are enough to get a search warrant for Layton's apartment.
We found a box of live rounds, 9mm rounds, and a Sig Sauer magazine.
A Sig Sauer, precisely the make of the gun thought to be used in the double murders. Amazingly, even without the weapon, the unused ammo may still connect Layton to the crime. Sometimes people cycle bullets through a gun, then remove them rather than firing the gun. If Layton had cycled the bullets, a specific mark would have been left on the shell casing that can identify the weapon. At SID, criminalist Doreen Hudson sets up to search for these extractor marks.
Extractor marks can be used to individualize and identify a particular firearm. They're as good as a fingerprint for identifying the actual source firearm.
Hudson is fortunate. The unused ammo found in Layton's home indicates it had been cycled through the gun. Now she has to compare those marks to the spent shells found at the crime scene.
The comparison of extractor marks is done using a comparison microscope, but focusing on the extractor groove and the lip of the cartridge case itself.
The surface area is tiny, and it takes a keen eye to detect the subtle markings. But the forensics leave no doubt. Hudson concludes it's the same ammo cycled through the same gun that killed Jamie and April.
We were confident that these extractor markings were unique, distinctive, and individual, that the identification made in this case is an absolute.
When I heard about the ballistics results, I was ecstatic. I thought that was great stuff. That's icing on a cake, boy. That's like, wow.
The shells that are found on the search warrant are really the critical piece of forensic evidence to put everything together.
And Williams, the obedient flunky, was apparently the shooter. And now ballistic evidence links his taskmaster, Kenny Layton, to the murder weapon. The diabolical duo are finally connected to the crime. But why would Layton risk a murder charge to beat a burglary rap? Investigators are shocked at the surprise twist. Investigators begin to uncover the twisted motive behind Kenny Layton's deadly ambush on Jamie Navaroli and April Mahoney.
He told a number of his friends that I'm a three-striker, that Jamie and April are going to get me thrown into prison.
California's three strikes law mandates that a person previously convicted of 2 serious or violent felonies who then commits a new felony is eligible to be sentenced to at least 25 years to life for their 3rd offense. Layton mistakenly believed his latest burglary would be his 3rd and final strike.
Basically, he was completely wrong on that. None of the commercial burglaries were a strike crime, so he was absolutely wrong. He had no strikes against him.
In the end, both Williams and Layton are found guilty for murdering Jamie Navaroli and April Mahoney and are sentenced to life in prison without parole.
It saddens me when I think about it. 2 young people whose lives end in that fashion, and the fact that they aren't around to be with their children. It's a real tragedy.
The meticulous work by detectives and SID brings justice to 2 killers. Killers who had permanently darkened the future of a once sunny LA suburban family.
I'd say the most gratifying part of this job is giving a voice to the forensic evidence.